Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Family Meal Podcast. My name is Grace. Thank you so much for tuning in. This week, I wanted to talk about something a little bit lighter this week. I feel like the past couple episodes have been really depressing, really like a lot of things to absorb, a lot of like sad news, and I just didn't want to do that. I wanted to kind of lighten it up and talk about everybody's favorite subject that gets everybody annoyed when it happens, and that is children in restaurants, okay? It's a very controversial topic. Because everybody who works in a restaurant doesn't like kids. So, I just wanted to talk about this because A, I think it's funny. B, I think it happens all the time. And C, I think parents, you're giving yourself too hard of a time sometimes. You're making your job too difficult on yourself with the bad choices that you're making in terms of bringing your kids to a restaurant. So I wanted to give you some insider info about how you can make your life easier, your kids' life easier, and your service staff's life easier. Because I think parents make mistakes, I'll say, not bad choices, but mistakes right off the bat that could be alleviated if you just were a little bit more, cognizant of the things you're doing wrong and the obstacles you're setting up for yourself. So, this is not a parent shaming episode, okay? I am not a parent. This is a PSA. So I'm going to be talking to you about things like picking restaurants, how to be good patrons, teaching kids about being good patrons. And I'm going to kind of go through what I'm calling the 5 deadly sins of bringing your kids to restaurants. So I've seen all kinds of kids come through the restaurant. I've seen super duper polite kids. I have seen what I call the iPad kids. And I have seen Satan children. So I think I'm well informed on the kind of things that you should and should not do, and how to make your life easier. So let's just jump right into it because I don't want to spend too much time introducing it. So the number one thing I think you do wrong is you pick a restaurant that doesn't have a kids menu. Here's why you're setting yourself up for failure, okay? When you pick a restaurant that doesn't have a children's menu, when you see that the restaurant doesn't have a children's menu, which I'm sure you saw on their website because I'm sure you looked, because you should be looking. When you see that they don't have a children's menu, that means we don't cater well to children. We are either not encouraging you to bring children, or we just are not going to give children any special treatment. That means your whole can I just get a bowl of pasta with marinara? Probably won't be able to happen. We certainly don't have chicken nuggets. We definitely don't have just plain chicken, whatever that means. And trust me, if you bring your children there and try to order like that, you're going to get ripped off. I'm just being honest with you. You're going to get charged way more for whatever substitutions you have to make to get something to please your child than you would if you just went to a normal restaurant that had a kids menu and ordered the $5 bowl of macaroni and cheese. It's actually probably cheaper for you to just have left your kids at home and to have called a sitter at that point. It's going to be so overly expensive. And I'll break down a little bit why. If you've listened to some of my past episodes, you're familiar with this idea of food supply chains, right? So you're familiar with this idea that when I order 3 pounds of pasta at a certain high price, because it's maybe premium pasta, because I'm a fancy restaurant, there's a certain price I want to sell those pasta portions at in order to make my money back on buying it in the first place and to make a little bit extra. So when you come in with a 5-year-old who's a little bit picky, I still want to get my money's worth out of that pasta portion, regardless of if a 5-year-old's eating it or a 45-year-old's eating it. So I'm going to charge you a little bit higher than if I was a diner. And when you ask for don't you just have marinara sauce? No, a fancy restaurant or a restaurant without a children's menu may not have just kid-friendly food lying around. There's other things you have to consider too. If you have really young children, we might not have high chairs. We may not have changing tables. I think we are actually required to have high chairs, at least one, but we may only have one, and it may not be great, or it may not fit your kid, or whatever. We don't have booster seats, that's for damn sure. So there's other things that you have to consider that just may not be kid friendly because we've set out to say, we can't have in big red sign, on the front of our door, kids not welcome, because that's rude. But just know that these are kind of subtle cues a restaurant may be putting out to be this isn't really a place you should bring your kids. And I think that's also kind of dependent on your kids, and only you know your kids well enough to decide this. But if you have really rambunctious kids that are really high energy, you probably don't want to bring them to a fancier place because the pacing of the dinner is going to be a lot slower. Your kids are going to get more impatient and want to get out of there and want to leave. Whereas if you went to somewhere that's, I'm not even saying like a diner, and there's nothing wrong with diners, but just place that was a little bit more fast casual, you'll be in and out in an hour at most. And, your kids can probably tolerate that. Now, in my particular instance, me and my sister were not very rambunctious kids. We were pretty good at sitting for long periods of time, and we didn't mind that. So my parents could, at a younger age, bring us to some nicer places. So you just have to know your kid based off that. But I definitely think, if you've got a rambunctious kid, if you've got a picky eater, and, I wouldn't bring them to a place that doesn't have a kids menu. You can always have a place with a kids menu and order off the adult menu for your kid. That's not a big deal. But you can't do the other way around. If a place doesn't have a children's menu, you're not ordering off of anything. So you're going to get upcharged, and you're probably going to be ripped off. And it was maybe better off just ordering a sitter and calling in a sitter because it would have been cheaper anyway. So that's the first sin. That's your cardinal sin of bringing your kids to the restaurant. Your second sin is that you don't encourage them to try something new. Now, this is going to sound like a hot take, okay? I know what you're thinking, Grace. I know I try to get my kids to try something new, but I don't want to spend money on something that they're not even going to touch, and then they're going to have to be hungry, and I'm going to have to make them chicken nuggets when I get home. I don't want to do that. I don't want to waste my money like that. I totally understand. I'm not saying have them try snails, okay? I'm not saying have them try, like, oysters or things that are, like, I don't think a kid would eat that, Like, I don't think a kid would like that at all. I'm saying, like, have them try chicken with a sauce that's not marinara or ketchup. That's all I'm suggesting. That's all I'm suggesting. Have them get pasta in an Alfredo sauce. Kids would probably like Alfredo sauce. Most kids actually already know they like Alfredo sauce. You know what I mean? Just take a step. We just take a little, something that like it's pretty hard to hate. It's like, you'd probably like that if you tried it. So my mom and dad actually have, I think, 2 genius hacks for that. And their hacks were twofold. They tag teamed this, okay? So my mother, when I was, probably like 4 or 5, so I couldn't really read well, my mother would take a menu, right? And she would very strategically show me certain things on the menu, right? So I'm going to use actually an example from our menu to give you a sense of what I'm talking about. So I can walk through this with you. I'm training you. I'm like super nanny, okay? So as I've mentioned a couple times, our restaurant's a little bit fancier. I wouldn't call it like super fancy, but we have like 4 different entrees on the menu, right? So my mother, if she was reading them to me, she probably would have directed me towards what is written on our menu as braised beef short ribs, Brajol style, with pancetta, polenta, and greens, right? Now, as a kid, you don't know what any of those words mean, okay? You have no idea what short ribs are. You don't know what brajol is. You don't know what pancetta is. So you might just be like, these are all weird new things. I don't want to eat it. What my mother would have done is she would have looked at that and pointed it out to me and said, so that's beef with bacon and like kind of like mashed potatoes with some veggies. And my kid brain would have been like, that sounds pretty good. I could eat that. And she might have pointed out, it's written on the menu as roasted chicken breast, Honeycrisp apple stuffing, cider gravy, summer strawberry cranberry sauce. She would have looked at that and said, so that's chicken, and it's got some stuffing that's got some apples in it, and gravy, and cranberry sauce, and would have been like, that's going to be a little bit sweeter, I don't know if you want that, but, she would have always tried to steer me and direct me and give me recommendations towards the things she thought I would like the most, right? So that was what my mother would do, right? So let's say I actually went for a third thing on the menu, which is written on the menu as seafood paella with cod, clams, shrimp, and saffron rice, right? If she told me that was shrimp and fish with rice. Let's say I went for that as like a 6-year-old, okay? So then my dad stepped in. Okay, so my dad, having heard the conversation, would have been like, okay, Grace is getting the paella. She's probably going to like that, but she probably won't want the cod, or she probably won't really like the cod, or she won't really like the clams. So she probably just really want the shrimp and the rice. So my dad then, being a genius, would always get, no matter where we were, no matter what was on the menu, he would always get the most kid-safe option on the menu, okay? Because my dad would realistically, he wasn't that picky. He would kind of eat anything. So he would always get the most like basic option. Like if spaghetti and meatballs was on the menu, that was what he was getting. Always. I remember that distinctly my whole life. You know what I mean? Or he'd get like a chicken breast or like something like that. So he probably would have gotten the roasted chicken breast, or he would have maybe gotten the beef, short ribs, but probably the chicken breast because that's really just so safe. So he would have gotten that, always with the intention that if I got my dish and I either didn't really like it or didn't like some of the things on it, so I couldn't really finish it and I was still kind of hungry, he could always split his dinner with me or just straight up trade with me. And we did that a lot as a kid. Like, we would just end up trading. And it was really nice because even though I didn't know consciously at the time he was doing that, it was always really nice when he would go, hey, do you want some of mine? Like, do you want some of my chicken? Do you want some of my, like, green beans? Do you want, like, some of what I have? And I would be like, yes, I do. I'm really hungry. And so he would give it to me. So that's a great parenting hack, I think, because it lets your kids try something new. It lets them go for something. And if it doesn't work out, you know, they're not going hungry. And like, well, that's what happens when you try something new. You go hungry and there's nothing you can do about it. You can kind of then even encourage them to try something else different, right? Like, oh, we'll try the chicken breast that's got this great gravy on it, you know, that you'll probably like. And so I like that because it encourages trying and it encourages stepping out a little bit. I think that's good for kids. You know, overall, I think it's great for them in restaurants. I know so many people who are such picky eaters about stuff that I'm like, well, why? Why do you not like that? Always kind of goes back to a weird experience they had as a kid. So that's my second sin of parenting. You don't have to push them to eat something like snails or something that's like, okay, they're definitely not going to like, you know, steak tartare or something. I mean, they might. I liked steak tartare as a kid. But, you know, encourage them to step out just a little bit. You know, you like shrimp, maybe you like clams. You know, you like salmon, maybe you like cod. You know, something like that. Okay, so rule number 3, and this one's also going to be a hot take. I'm just having, this is a hot ones episode. You give your kids an iPad. Oof. Breaks my heart when I go into a restaurant and I look at a table with 2 parents and a kid who's just on their iPad, headphones on, just gone. It makes me so sad, and I'll tell you why. And this is kind of, again, going back to my own personal experience. When I was a kid, going out to dinner with my parents was the one opportunity I got, to feel like an adult, which was great. I loved that as a kid. I loved feeling like I was an adult and I was included and I got to go out. You know, I was like, it was a big deal for me mentally. And then I also loved it because it was this time where my parents kind of gave me their undivided attention, you know, like me and my sister, we got all the attention when we went out to dinner. You know, they would talk to us about school and about our life and about our friends, you know, and just about the things we were interested in. You know, it was a moment for them to kind of treat us like adults, talk to us like adults. And, you know, they weren't actually talking to us like adults, but it felt like that as a kid, you know? So when I see kids with the iPad, I'm like, you know, again, I know that maybe you as parents wanted to go out to dinner, you didn't want to cook. I totally respect that. Again, maybe hire a sitter. I don't know, you know, just a thought. Or really use that as a teaching moment, you know? And this goes into my my cardinal sin number 4, which is that you don't teach them table manners. So I think going back to rule number 3, I think it's really a missed opportunity. It's a missed opportunity to connect. It's a missed opportunity to teach, which I'll get into, but it really just makes me sad. And I also think it kind of diminishes the whole going out to eat kind of a thing. Like, even when I was like a preteen, me and my dad would go out to breakfast on like Saturdays or something, and that just made me feel special. I just loved that. I loved that special one-on-one time. It was a really great, it's something I look back on very positively. So I think you're missing out on that. I think it doesn't have to be somewhere nice. It could be a diner. It could be, you know, you just go in to pick up food. It really doesn't have to be much, but it could mean a lot, even in its small action, right? So moving on to number 4, you're not teaching them table manners, right? This is where we tie into COVID a little bit, because we got a lot of outdoor dining, okay? And, you know, that's granted going to end once it gets cold, as I've mentioned, but we're not taking the opportunity to teach them table manners. You sit in the chair, you put the napkin on your lap, this is the fork you use, right? And especially with COVID, these things are important, right? Because we don't want kids running around, because that defeats the point of making the table socially distant if 2 of your little rugrats are going over to this other table and coughing on them and not wearing a mask, okay? You know, especially now we got to teach about masks and stuff for kids. You know, this is all a good low pressure situation to teach kids this kind of stuff. You know, you can lead by example, right? You can, you know, say, okay, this is what we do. And that was what my parents always did. They always sat at the table and then they immediately put the napkin on their lap, and they would they didn't like enforce it or anything, but they were leading by example. And that's how I learned to do it, right? I know table manners may kind of seem like an arcane or irrelevant skill nowadays. Like, nobody really cares about propriety or, you know, doing things a specific way, and you're not in many situations where either you'll get caught like doing it wrong and be embarrassed, or that it's just necessary that you know it. But I think it's still really important. You know, we don't have a lot of quote unquote formal situations in US culture. Like, we don't have many instances where we have to act in a very formal setting and we have a propriety and a way to do things. We don't have that a lot, but I think later in life, it kind of turns into, being professional and your professionalism, right? If you learn through your table manners that, there's a way that you sit with good posture and you don't slouch at the table, you don't put your elbows on the table, you carry yourself in a certain way, you act in a certain way, eventually I think that comes back to help you. I think it's always a good thing down the line. Then you learn when you're in an interview, to sit properly in chairs and to, not like be slouching and leaning on the table in front of you. If you go out to, when I did interviews for colleges, sometimes I would have to go out and do a coffee shop with people. And, I don't think that they're necessarily like gauging your table manners and saying like, oh, she wasn't quite right and she used the wrong. They're not doing that. But just if you have horrible table manners, they're going to notice it because it's obvious. Whereas if you just have passable, nice table manners, then you look better overall kind of subconsciously to that person. And I really think that that's something beneficial always for people to learn. It's kind of like your first steps, like your baby version of learning to be professional, is through table manners. So that'll bring me nicely into number 5, which is that you order for your kids with the asterisk of a certain age. Okay. I was a very, very shy kid for most of my life, okay? I know you can't tell now because I have a podcast where I talk excessively for a long time, but granted, I am alone. So that does say something about how comfortable I am by myself and not in front of other people. But I empathize with not being good at talking to people and being very nervous to talk to people. I was always very anxious, still am. But I want to caveat that with of a certain age. Okay, obviously like 3, 4, 5, 6. I get it, right? When we start getting into 8, 9, I'm looking at you funny, okay? I'm looking at you just a little bit funny because I'm like, your kid can speak up for themselves, and especially now with COVID, right? You're having a lot of kids who are now not in school settings. They're not around other kids, right? So, how are you going to teach socialization? How are you going to teach, about speaking to adults and making eye contact and using your manners and saying please and thank you? How are you going to teach that, right? A restaurant is a great low pressure way to do that, as I said kind of before. And here's why. Because all they have to do is look at the server and say, can I please have chicken nuggets, right? That's all they have to do. And then when they say, sure you can, you say, thank you. That's all they have to do. So very low pressure, right? There's no consequences if they mess up, because if they mess up, you could just always be like, oh, he meant he wanted the chicken tenders, not the, you know what I mean? So you're there to back it up if it goes wrong, right? And they can try it. They can make eye contact with their server. They can say please. They can say thank you. They can speak for themselves. And it's kind of teaching that socialization that, your kids just might not be getting in school right now because they're not in school. And again, this is one of those things, it's going to benefit them later in life. Like, no favors were done for me because from the ages of like 4 to 7, I didn't order my own meals. That didn't do me any favors in life. Didn't help my anxiety. Didn't help with my speaking skills that weren't very good. It didn't help. So it would have been better if I had just gotten over at a young age. I love when I've had plenty of like young kids, 5 years old that go, can I please have, and they look so cute and they're very confident. And I just love that. I feel like that's got to benefit you later in life. I feel like that's got to do you favors because you're comfortable just speaking and looking at people, and so I think that's really, I think that's a great skill to teach. I think restaurants are a great way to do it. Again, you don't have to be at a hyper fancy restaurant to do this. You could be doing this at a diner, right? You could have your kids look at the server and say, can I please have a grilled cheese with bacon? And they will be like, yes. And you can be like, thank you, Even if you have to kind of, like, I'm usually patient with parents if they kind of give me a high sign, like they look at their kid and go, okay, tell the waitress what you'd like to order, and they'll look at me and I'll just like be smiling. I'm there to help you. I'm not just gonna be like, oh my god, just tell me what you want, just tell me what your kid wants. I mean, some people are like that, but most people usually won't be. They'll be like, all right, the kid's gonna do it, I'm gonna let the kid do it. So yeah, I think it benefits them. We're here to help you out, don't worry about it, but push them a little bit. This is a safe space. Restaurants are a safe space to push your kid a little out of their comfort zone. That's all I'm saying. So those are my 5 cardinal sins bringing your children to restaurants. I hope this has helped you out. I hope this has given you a little bit of background, maybe a little bit of helpful information. Being a parent is hard. I absolutely have no idea what that's like. but there are plenty of ways that you can make it easier for you, make it easier for your kids, and make it easier on the staff at the restaurant you're at, so that you can have a successful outing with your kids. We can teach some social skills, we can teach some manners, and we can all have a fun time and enjoy our dinner in peace. So that's it. That's all I got for this week. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. Please remember to be kind to all your service staff during this difficult time, and be nice to them with your kids, and be cognizant of them when you bring your kids. As I always say, just because we work there and we're called servers, it does not mean we are servants. We are people, and we are not babysitters. So please do not treat us like we're babysitters, because I ain't babysitting your kid. I will just yell at them and then yell at you and then not give you good service. I'm just kidding. I hope this has been helpful. I hope you continue to support restaurants during this time, even if it means bringing your kids. Just go to the right places. And as always, please remember to stay safe and be well. Thank you so much. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.